What is shaking, you guys? Welcome back to the Let's Go Win podcast. You are in for a treat today. We have a true expert, host of the iTunes Top 25 Marketing and Entrepreneurship Podcast, The Lucky Titan. Josh Tapp has worked with over 1,000 of the world's top entrepreneurs, discovering their most coveted business success secrets and sharing them with the world. His company, Podcast Multipliers, has helped over 750 entrepreneurs and counting to launch, monetize, and scale their own industry-leading podcasts, and has generated millions of dollars in sales for his own company, Podcast Multipliers. And overall, he's just a good dude. Josh, what's up, brother? How are you doing?
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. Doing fantastic. And I'm so excited. That 750 number you just quoted, we are like 5 people away from passing 1,000. So I can start bragging about that now.
Well, and honestly, brother, maybe that's my first question is you are having some pretty, I would say, meteoric rise. You're growing exponentially. But I think it's because you're very good at what you do, but you're just a good, likable, relatable, easy to talk to guy. Tell me, what is that the principles that you use to grow? Because you're doing a hell of a job of it.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. To be real with you, every quote unquote like meteoric rise, it's never really that way. It's a ton of groundwork laid. And then when all the pieces finally align, it hockey sticks, right? That's just how growth is. But I can honestly say to really answer your question is that what I always teach people is like, you don't have to be the extrovert, right? I am a very introverted person in some ways and very extroverted in other ways. Like with this, I love the one-to-one conversations. I can be very extroverted, but if you send me to an event as an attendee, I hide in the corner. Right. I go find the seat where I don't have to sit next to anybody. I'm like hidden back there. And I'm always going like, I'm going to go land some deals by sitting in the audience and talking to people. And I never do. But I'll go on stage any day of the week. So I work with a lot of people like that who consider themselves those introverts, especially in the podcasting world. And it's all about learning to just be authentic in where you are. But I also want to caveat that by saying is that authenticity it's not you being exactly who you're like the worst version of you. It's being the best version of you. Because I watch all these people who go out, and I'm going on a mild tangent here, but it actually ties in to what we do very well. Is like I see all these people who look at like Gary Vaynerchuk or these other people, and they're like, be yourself. And so being yourself means you need to curse like a sailor and just show the world, like flash your cleavage, whatever, right? Like, because that's who you are. That's not the best version of you, like the best version of you is what you should be showing to the world. And that doesn't mean you need to fake it. Just be the you that you are around the people that you like to be around. Right. And yes, if you curse, it's not the end of the world, but anybody who's using the F-bomb every other word, that's not being authentic. That's being uneducated, in my opinion.
No, I love the subject you're talking about because I actually coach a lot on, and it's called Show Up As You. And to your point, it's not what the world has told you to be, being exactly who you are, being comfortable with who you are. That's the genuine, authentic piece that comes through. And again, I've talked to you several times where I can see exactly who you are. Now, it does surprise me a bit to hear you're the guy that likes to maybe not be in the spotlight, but you're just such a bright light. But I do understand, like, that's not how you charge your batteries. So how did you figure out to be so comfortable with exactly who you are? Because I think if I'm speaking to most of the people I do, that's what everybody wants. They want to be comfortable with who they are. They want to show up as their best version of themselves. How do we do it, man?
I know it's going to sound really cliche, but it's the practice makes perfect. I have, so my business partner, we've been in business for 10 years. He's my brother, and he's actually my older brother. And he is a fantastic example of this because his name's Tyler. You will not find him anywhere online or anything, right? Tyler runs most of our company. He's the operations guy. And what's so intriguing about his story is like, he's my older brother. So having his younger brother be the CEO of the Dancing Monkey, the one who's like making the calls, you have to be really humble for that. So like watching him and how he's gone about it has been really interesting, but he's what he likes to call the second in command. And he believes that every first in command, the firsts need a really solid second. And I believe that. I believe every first needs a second and a good third. And being authentic and being that person of humility is one of the big first steps. But watching him has helped me realize for myself my strengths and my weaknesses. And having somebody like that to keep you in check is hugely valuable. Some people will tell you, hey, use your spouse for that. But I feel like we have blinders with our spouse or our partner where we're like, they're going to tell us one thing and we may not believe it because it's this weird phenomenon. I don't know what you would call it. There's probably a whole psychological study around this, but you just don't tend to listen to your spouse the same way.
No, I think there's a ton of truth behind that. Look, I could do no wrong for the most part, other than to her, but to everyone else of the world, my wife thinks I walk on waters. It's just the way it is, and
Right.
vice versa. So that makes a lot of sense. I got to ask you, the Lucky Titan, who came up with the name? What is that all about, brother? I love it. It's brilliant, but it's, were you just a marketing genius, or is there some real deep-seated meaning for you with this name?
So it's actually kind of a funny story. I'm glad you asked that. Nobody ever asked me this. What's so intriguing about branding a podcast in particular is there are two main ways to actually make a podcast that sticks. One is the route of intrigue. Like, what does that even mean? Right? That's what mine's about. It's like, it's a memorable title that I don't really get it. Right? People call me the Lucky Titan all the time. That's not actually what I'm, the point of the brand, right? But then the second way that you can brand a podcast is literally how to blank, right? It's telling people exactly what it is. I'm actually starting, it's my 5th podcast now. It's going to be called How to Start a Podcast, or excuse me, How to Monetize a Podcast. That's going to be the title. And so when people see it, they're like, oh, duh, that's what it's about, right? I watch people all the time try to like name it their name. That does not work unless you're Tony Robbins. I'm just going to throw it out there, right? And I feel bad, JM, if that's your show. If you've got any shows that are like the JM Ryerson show, right? I know yours is Let's Go Win.
Ego to do that. It just, truth be told, I can't. But I know what you're saying. Yes.
Yeah. Well, it fits well that way. But the funny story about this is I actually started my podcast. It was called The Lucky Entrepreneur. And for the first 20 episodes or so, that was the title. And then we got a cease and desist from Entrepreneur Magazine. Apparently they have the trademark and the copyright for the word entrepreneur, which it's like one of 3 cases. So it's a battle I could win. I could legally fight them, but it'd be like $20, $30, $50,000 in legal fees at the time. I'm like, I'll just change it. But what it was actually at the perfect timing, because in about 20 episodes, you start to have this, I call it the come to Jesus moment, where you're like, what am I really about? Right? It's like, why am I actually doing this? And for me, it was that opportunity to pivot, because at the time when I first started it, I'm like, okay, I'm going to interview entrepreneurs. And so I was interviewing kind of lower end people. That sounds horrible, but people who were on the earlier side of entrepreneurship. And I was like, I really want to interview those people who are like, they're ridiculously successful, but nobody knows who they are. And so I started seeking those people out, and we changed it to the Lucky Titan, which is the Titans of industry, right? And the funny thing is that brand, just people liked it. It's hit. And so every time we do a product or service, it's some play off of that. We're actually working on some awards that are going to be like a Spartan helmet. Everything's going to be around that theme. And funny enough, it's a very masculine brand, but we have like 70% of our audience are females. Very bizarre. Anyways, it's kind of a tangent there, but that's why I believe when you launch a brand, you need to pick one of the 2 routes of complete intrigue. And if you're going to do it, because I really didn't even do a great job of it. There's one podcast out there. I don't even remember the name of it. It is a like ugly blue color, but it has a giant yellow rubber duck in the middle. It doesn't even say the title on it. And that show is like one of the top 4 shows at any given time. I can't remember what the name of it is. But it just sticks, right? It just sticks in your brain. And it sparks that intrigue. So that's one of the things I would recommend to people is either a how-to or that, right?
Well, think about it for sure, because I was similar to your story. This show started as Transcend in Life, because transcendence and transcend is a very important term to me. Unfortunately, to most of the world, they don't actually know what transcend means. And so it wasn't it wasn't making sense. The other thing is everything I do is let's go win. So it was like, why are you making it confusing with transcendent life and then let's go win? So everything has just become let's go win for me.
Yeah. Well, I love that about, sorry to interrupt you, but I love your brand for that reason, because you're like, let's go on this journey together and win. It's obvious what your show is about, right? They're like, hey, I do want to win. I'm going to come listen to this show. It's not as hard as I think people try to make it more creative than it needs to be.
I did out of the gate 1,000%. I was trying to craft it this way. And again, going back to the authenticity thing, it was just like, this is in my DNA. I love the idea of winning the day. That doesn't mean I'm not going to lose or fail. I fail all the time. I'm great at failing, but I love to set myself up to win. So brother, talk to me about podcasting and, utilizing that to grow your brand. Why is podcasting? Where did that come from for you to be like, this is what I'm going to do? Because I kind of tripped into it and then fell in love with the idea because of so many amazing conversations. What was it for you that really stuck, that you're like, podcasting is the deal?
Yeah, I love this question, because truth be told, I did not set out to get into podcasting. It's that age old story. Everybody always talks about it. The industry I'm in was not the industry I set out to be successful in. And what's interesting about it, my first like quote unquote business experience was in network marketing. And I quickly realized I'm working ridiculously hard. Like we had like $400,000 worth of quote unquote volume going through my line. And I was keeping like $1,000 a month or something. I'm like, okay, this is rigged. I'm putting so much freaking time into this. Someone is keeping the pot, right? And even though I still love that company, they're great people. I think network marketing is not as bad as everybody thinks it is. I just realized, what if I could keep the other 99% of the margin? And so I just went on a journey of saying, what business could I start seeing big margins in? And so I started in marketing, and my marketing journey pulled me into a spiral where I was like constantly fighting the ebb and flow of finding new customers for my agency. But the tipping point for me, or what I call is like my epiphany moment, was I was sitting in a mastermind. I'd pay for this mastermind literally right before this, probably 2 days before. I had gotten a call from our biggest client, and they were like, hey, thanks, you've done such a great job. I actually don't think we need you for the next year or two, because we had overdone we'd done our job so well that they fired us. And I remember sitting there going, this is stupid. This is such a dumb game. Like if I just worked myself out of a job, and they were literally making up half of our revenue at the time. And so I just had one of those, again, come to Jesus moments where I just said, man, this is not where I want to be. So I was in this mastermind 2 days later, and I'm just brooding, to be completely honest. I'm like leaning back in my chair, like I'm so mad at life. I hate marketing. I hate everything about the world right now. And my poor wife, she put up with so much during those times, because I was constantly just grumpy and like, oh, this sucks. This is hard. And she was paying our way through things. And but anyways, I was sitting there, and I had this guy. He was kind of like a mentor coach to me at the time. He leaned over to me and he's like, I'm not going to say the phrase that he said to me, but basically like, what's your problem, dude? Like, why are you being such a whiner? And I just like went off, like we're just kind of whispering to each other in this mastermind. And he's like, well, dude, just do a podcast. And I'm like, yeah, why don't I do a podcast? I love podcasting. There was no rhyme or reason. It just kind of like, is what I wanted to do. So I started 4 different shows that were not successful, and doing all that and trying everything, seeing what worked and what didn't. That's when the Lucky Titan came to be, when I really figured out my voice and figured out podcasting was a game changer. And for us, ever since I've started a podcast, even those 4 unsuccessful ones, I've never wanted for money. I've always had it. It's a bizarre phenomenon.
It's a really remarkable description, because everyone that podcasts says the exact same thing. It's this odd thing that you can't put your finger on. Now, for me, I think I've figured out, and it's because the podcast we're doing currently, the one I just did prior to this, you meet the coolest freaking people, and you get to hear their story. You get to hear their successes, their failures. So, for instance, I get to go back into Josh's head and say, brother, when you were brooding, when it wasn't working, your client just left, what allowed you to get over that hump? obviously you have the support of your wife, which is fantastic. Although I'm sure she was like, all right, figure it out, dude.
Sick of working.
What take me back into that mindset. The guy says, hey, start a podcast. You're like, cool. But then there's something that happened that allowed you to overcome the fact that your biggest client, 50% of your revenue, just said, we don't need you any longer.
Yeah. And that's a great pivot point, because truth be told, one of the reasons the podcast started to appeal to me is I had been listening to podcasts for years. And I remember being like, how are people meeting such successful people? Because I'm sitting here trying to pitch my local real estate agent on Facebook ads, and they're like freaking out over a $500 a month payment. And I'm like, I want to work with somebody who, if I pitch $100,000 to them, they'll be like, great, sign the check and call it a day, And so that was for me when I started my first show. I'm like, how do we get in the door with big, high level people? And so the connection in my brain was like, I don't want this client. I want this client. Who is the person who knows that client? It's the podcasters. They know everybody. And so I started to view that as that could be my way in the door. And funny enough, I was like, I'm going to shoot for the stars. And in my brain at the time, I was like, somebody's making 10 million. That's the guy. Like, he's made it, And funny story on that is, like, you hit that point and you're like, oh, it's not as much as you think it is, especially in business, right? Not from a spending, like if you had 10 million in your pocket, great. But anyways, moral of the story is I reached out to this guy on LinkedIn. He was the only guy I knew at the time that I was like, I know how much this guy makes. He's doing at least 8 figures. I've got to meet this guy. So I reached out to him on LinkedIn and was like, hey, I'm starting this new show. I've been seeing your content. I would just really love to have you come on the show and share this with my new audience. And I did not expect a response, but literally 30 seconds, he's like, boom, yep, love to come on. Send me the link. Wow. And I go, what? It was that easy? Because for me, I'm sitting here going, I could like figure out what this guy wants and sell him something. Now I have an opportunity to meet with this guy, where before we used to have to like knock doors and try to run Facebook ads and build funnels and do 45 other things to get in the door with a high level person. But literally one message, 30 seconds later, he responded. And that changed my paradigm. So I had him on my show, and instead of trying to sell him something, I just said, who else needs to be on my show? And he goes, you know what? Let me connect you. Come to find out, this guy runs a mastermind with billionaires. And he sent me his entire mastermind list with intros, 45 people doing at least $1 billion. Bam. Right. And I go, I've just cracked the code. I'm in the door with these people. So what I started doing was, as I was interviewing them, just listening to what they were saying. And as I'm interviewing these people, I'm realizing all they really care about is legacy. They just want to share their mission. They don't have time, but they have a lot of money. And so when I started asking them afterwards, I'm like, do you have your own show? Like, you should totally start your own podcast. Like, here's what it's done for me. And they're like, well, can I just pay you to do it for me? And the first time somebody said that, I was like, yeah, why don't I know how to do it now? Why not? And that was that pivotal point for me, where we started to just attract clients, because they're like, I just want what you have. Right.
Yeah. The word that you use is legacy. And it's such a interesting word for me, because I've said many times on this show, Let's Go Win is my legacy company. The first 3, they're amazing companies. I loved every one of them for what they were, but there's something different when it comes to a legacy-based business. Now, you and your brother work together. I'm not sure, however, many other family members, but the minute I hear family working together, I think legacy. So is that kind of what you're doing, brother? Is this a legacy-based business for you, where it's like, I hope my kids and someone continues this on because it's bigger than Josh, it's bigger than my older brother? Is that the idea, brother?
Yeah, very much so. We got an offer a few years ago, or last year. It was last year, for a very large sum of money to buy our company. And we had this moment where we sat there and we're like, do we want the money, or do we want to keep the legacy going? And we turned him down. We turned down the offer, and it was a fantastic offer. But what we realized at that moment is, like, we're not doing everything that we could do. And that's why we launched our new offer, where it's a lower cost offer where we can help more people. But it's kind of beside the point. But to answer your question is, yes, it is very legacy driven. Are you familiar with that Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Mm-hmm. So the highest need is self-actualization, right? I've done a ton of studies on this, but what's interesting is self-actualization you can phrase it in a lot of different ways. Legacy is another version of self-actualization. Status is another version of self-actualization. Philanthropy, right? We hear all these different words that actually meet that need. And a lot of people look at it and they're like, oh, well, that just means you want to be famous and these other things, right? Everybody has a core need and want to be loved by people. And what's interesting is as you become successful in any area of your life, it's human nature to want to share it with people, right? If you're a good person. And that self-actualization level of the hierarchy is really what I found. That's where I like to meet people and help provide services for people in that area of their life. Because truth be told, it's fun helping a business make more money. Don't get me wrong, but like, I don't really like working with companies that are funded. So like they've gone through their seed round, their ABC round, whatever. I don't really like working with them. We've done it a few times, but it's just a different world. It's not legacy based. It's like 100% profit based. And how do we sell this company? Right. Which is fun, right? I love getting equity in companies like that because it's like a little nest egg on the side, but like, it's not who I'm about, what I'm about. And so what we've done with Podcast Multipliers or the Lucky Titan brand as a whole is saying, let's build something that can start to generate a movement around actually becoming successful. Because I honestly believe that entrepreneurship is the number one most noble career on the planet. And our big thing is we want to just support that in any way possible.
Well, you've spent a lot of truth and knowledge. And one of the things I want to rewind back to, and I had said, man, you have this exponential growth. And you said, look, there's a lot of groundwork being laid. There's a lot of foundation that took place. All the grind that no one ever gets to see or ever will really get to see, because once you're well known, it's like, oh, of course. Talk to me about what that looked like for you in the beginning of, Podcast Multipliers or the Lucky Titan overall. What were the basics, the principles that allowed you to sustain, to be here, and then ultimately to thrive the way that you guys are today?
Yeah. And actually this is a fun question because our, my show for the first 500 episodes, I think it was, I asked people, how do you go from 0 to 6 figures in your business? And could you do it in under 30 days? I think I actually interviewed you on that, JM, back on the Lucky Titan a few years ago. I wanted to ask that question because I was launching new product lines and I'm like, how do I get them to actually like hit that 6-figure mark? But I wanted other people to learn it as well. And for myself, I've learned that each step of the process, it's that new level, new devil, right? I don't know if you've heard that phrase before, but every time you hit a certain point in your business, what was that?
Sorry, I didn't mean to totally interrupt, but
you're totally fine.
New devil, that's a new one for me. So,
oh, there you go. I think that's actually a network marketing phrase, which is funny. I was not going to come on here and talk about network marketing because I am not a huge advocate of it. But if you want to make a ton of money, start your own thing or buy something. Anyways, moral of the story though, right? So new level, new devil, right? I have found that there are like specific points that people get stuck in their business. They get stuck at 3, they get stuck at 0, right? Like making any sort of sale. Then they get stuck at $300,000. They get stuck at $1 million, 3 million, 10 million. Because what's interesting is at each level of a company, and I'm talking bootstrapped businesses, I'm not talking like tech companies that go raise funding, right? The hardest phase of that for everybody is getting that first $300,000. But what's interesting is when you hit that first $300,000, you're usually not making any money personally, right? You're probably in the hole when you're doing about 300,000. And you're shaking your head, Jam, probably because you've experienced this, right? Several times, right? I think the most frustrating barrier to hurdle is actually that $300,000 mark, because in order to get to 300,000, you just have to spray your message out there and see what sticks. You're like, I have this product or service. Here's the market. Do they want it? Right? There are ways to circumvent that and do it faster, right? There's coaches who can help you with that, right? Of getting you from 0 to 300,000. But that first phase is what I call that product market fit, right? It's like, do people actually want what you have? But the hardest thing from 300,000 to $1 million, that gap is so hard to bridge simply because that's the systems gap. Because you have to learn who you need on your team, how to run the systems, how to train people. that for me was absolutely the hardest phase to break. I still am fighting that one today, is to manage the team well, right? Because my go-to is always just throw money at the problem. That's what I do. But when it comes to business as a whole, is like the getting stuck, the laying the foundation. Nobody's even going to know who you are until you hit about $1 million, right? You're virtually unknown in the industry until you've hit about $1 million. And I think this applies for physical products. I think it's like if you're an e-commerce person, if you're a coach, if you're, like us, you're an agency style or whatever, right? I don't think anybody really knows your name until you've passed that point. But what will happen, and this is what we've figured out, was once you've hit that $1 million mark in a company, that's when you have your systems in place, you have everything in place. But that's the scale phase, right? That's where you're like, I've got to scale it up, and I've got to work to leverage the people I have, the systems I have effectively, and learn to speed up those systems. And for a lot of people, they think, oh, I want to have that problem. But truth be told, there are people. So I have this guy I know. He runs a business with 100% margins. Okay. This is what I would call a lifestyle business. It's him. That's all he does, because he's selling his time. And what he does is he goes to big companies. They're doing like $50 to $100 million. He goes to them and says, hey, I'm going to come into your business. I don't expect any fee, period. I will come in and I will give you a 1% increase per month in this area of your business. And he says, if I give you that 1% increase, will you give me 10% of it? And they say yes, because they're like, hey, it's a commission-based model. It's such a brilliant model. But what I love about it is he's not promising the world. He's like, I'm just going to give you a 1 to 2% increment. Like, sweet, sure, go for it, right? Nobody's even going to question it. But when it's a $50 million company and he gives them a 1% increase in sales, you do the math on that, right? I think it's like $500,000. He keeps 10% of that. He's at 50 grand for raising them 2% or 1% or whatever, right? And that's what he does. And he has like 10 clients at any given time. And every month he just raises them by 1% and he keeps his 10%. And he's doing, I think, $500,000 a year. He pockets more money than most of the guys who I know have a $3 million company, because he's 100% margin. He just comes in, he does his little things, and he walks away, because he figured out that from that stage, that's another systems gap, right? He said, hey, I can fill that systems gap. So for myself, is kind of going first full circle with you, JM, is like, I found that I got stuck at each one of those places. And it was because simply I had to find product market fit first. And that was a lot of product testing. I did about 40 some odd different product variations before we landed on Podcast Multipliers. And the reason we shifted to Podcast Multipliers, which is our done for you agency where we produce the shows and multi-purpose the content, market them, all that. The reason we did that was because I was having people on my show who were saying, Josh, can you just do it for me? I don't have time for this. And I started off at like $2,500 a month, and then $5,000 a month, and then $10,000 a month. Just kept raising the price because people were like, it's worth it to me. I'd rather just not have to deal with it. And, we've worked with some big name people now because of that, because just listening to what they wanted and then just giving it to them. I think people overcomplicate that by saying, well, how do I break that $300,000 mark? And you're like, just ask people what they want, provide the service. If you don't like it, sell the client off to somebody else, right? Find somebody who's really good at it and refer them over. It's no harm, no foul is how I always run my companies.
Well, one of the things you've mentioned throughout, and you've mentioned coach, you've mentioned masterminds, there's something about educating yourself as you're doing this, right? So you're looking for the product market fit, but you're continuing to surround yourself, is kind of how I'm hearing it, with people that are helping better yourself. How often are you doing this, Josh? Because so often I tell people, everyone, look, don't hire a coach until you know who their coach is, because if they don't have a coach, you don't use them. So it sounds like this is a philosophy you also kind of follow. What are you doing on a yearly, monthly, I don't know, basis where you're bettering yourself so that you don't stay stagnant or even decay in your company? Is that something that you put into play on a weekly, monthly, daily, I don't know how often basis?
Yeah. Well, and that's a good question, because truth be told, and I just have to caveat this by saying this to everyone, is we live in a very info-beast world. I'm not the one who came up with that term, but there's so much information out there. And the truth be told is there are a million ways to make $1 million. And everybody's like looking for this secret hack to make it. Truth be told, just pick a route and stick to it, Don't jump around all. That was my problem. I jumped around so many times. I could have made any of them work. I just gave up too soon. Just pick a route that you're like, this is something I want to stick to. Find the best in the industry and pay them what you have to mirror them. I have found some of the most, like the least fulfilling things for me are buying courses. I love courses. I even sell courses. Courses are a poor man's way of thinking about learning something, in my opinion. The fastest way to actually generate any real value in a business is to hire someone to do it for you or do it with you, right? If you're like, Josh, I have no money, I guarantee you, and I don't advocate for getting into debt. I'm going to add that disclaimer in here, but if you had to put it on a credit card, do it. That's what I do. If I'm like, hey, I can't afford this, I take that out because I know it will pay for itself. But to answer your question, Jim, is what I usually do is I have at least one mastermind going at any time. So either I am a member of it or I am hosting it myself. And a mastermind being, hey, this is 3 to 5 of us, maybe up to 10 of us who are all right around the same level, who are trying to scale up to that next level. That is huge. The second thing that I would say is hiring agencies, hiring people who already know what they're doing. Instead of trying to figure out and learn things, just learn to pay the best in the industry. I pride myself in knowing the best in every single industry. And if I don't, I find the best, because when somebody asks me, hey, Josh, I need to write a book and I need it to be successful, I'm like, okay, great. Go hire Amy Collette, right? She's the one that we refer people over to if you need a book that needs to blow up, right? You're welcome, Amy. But anyways, it's pushing people in that right direction and making sure they know the best person. But I get to know who the best is and then be resourceful. How can you hire those people? And I only hire people based off of if they can guarantee results. Okay. Don't go for these people who are like, I'm going to show you how to make $1 million a year. And my guarantee is that if you follow every single step of the system perfectly, all the stars will align and you'll make $1 million. That's like the dumbest claim on the planet, right? Like I had a speaker coach lady that we were working with where she guarantees you $130,000 of speaking gigs or she doesn't get paid, right? I think she charges like 30 grand. So she's keeping a tiny pittance. You're making 100 grand just to work with her, right? That's a guarantee that I can get behind because I say, hey, you know what? There's no risk in it for me. I'm either going to make money or they're going to pay me back, right? You can do that with lead gen agencies. You can do that with other people. I recommend doing that first. I think coaches are hugely, hugely valuable. Don't get me wrong. But I think people jump too quickly into just getting a coach and they get in this, I don't even know what they call it, but it's like a coaching loop where they're sitting here constantly like, I'm just going to do what they're telling me, do what they're telling me, do what they're telling me, which is correct. But sometimes you are not in a position to where you're ready for that coach. And they won't know that until you've hired them, but they're not going to come to you and say, hey, sorry, I don't think you're actually in the position to hire me, right? Like they want your money, right? Everybody wants each other's money. So I believe you should always be a part of a mastermind because that's the fastest way to grow, in my opinion. But then secondly, leverage done for you services or done with you services. So that means they're going to do some part of it and then you're going to do some part of it. But then at that point, I recommend hiring a coach or a consultant, depending on your needs. Right now, we just hired somebody yesterday, $150,000, a sales consultant. She's going to be coming in. She's going to coach my team individually. I'm super excited to work with her, right? $150,000, that's out of most people's reach, right? Right off the bat. But for us, we're like, hey, we've got 5 to 6 salespeople, but we're at a point where Josh sucks at selling. So we need to leverage somebody else to come in and actually close the deals and train my team. So she's going to come in and do that for us. That's what I do, is leverage those people. I do heavily believe in coaching. I just think there's a time and a season for it.
Yeah, leverage is clearly something that you've learned. And it's interesting because you have this entrepreneurial spirit about you where you've said several times, I pivoted. You said, I just gave up too soon. This is what I hope every budding entrepreneur, even veteran entrepreneurs, how often do you put in all the work and it's about to blow up? You can't see it, right? It's right there, but you can't see it, but it's just, you're about to that finish line and you're like, nope, this isn't working. I move on. I love that advice that you said, brother. How do you persist through so that you don't stop too short, so that you're not a foot from that finish line, or not finish line, because that's the wrong terminology, but you know what I'm saying, where it actually opens up, stars start to align. What advice would you give entrepreneurs to say, this is how you keep going?
Number one is stop hiding behind your computer. I think people we get in this world of solopreneurship, which I think is the stupidest way to approach business. If you try to go it alone, you will fail. I can promise you that. And you might eventually succeed, but you're going to have failure after failure after failure. Or maybe you're one of those like 14-year-olds who just nails it, got lucky the first time and makes millions of dollars. Congratulations. Good luck on your second business. It's not that easy. I'm highly opinionated if you can't tell, but what I found is like, you need to surround yourself with people who are going to help you work through that. Right. It's kind of funny to go back to this, right? But you look at like Alcoholics Anonymous, right? They're a bunch of alcoholics who meet up every single, I don't know what it is, once a month, once a week, whatever they meet up. But the goal is to help everybody to become better. And what will happen is when you have your failures in business, which will happen daily, you can come to this group and say, man, I'm having these failures. And somebody else will go, hey, I just had that. Here's how I solved it. Here's who I hired. Here's what I did with my team. That is the way that you'll last longer, because there's so many people are going into business in today's world. And they're like, okay, I've got 3 months of runway. And if I can't make enough in 3 months to feed my family, I'm just gonna have to quit and go get a job. Right? That is a horrible, horrible way of looking at business. I look at it as saying, what's my 5 years plan, right? I want to be making a living for my family in 5 years. And I'm going to do it in the part-time while I'm working a job, or maybe have another business that's kicking enough money off to keep my family alive. Or maybe I have a spouse who's willing to work while I work in the part-time and watch the kids or whatever. There's a lot of different ways to go about it. But if you'll just do a little bit of work every day, surround yourself with people, and you just stick it out, you will succeed. There's been a statistic. Everybody always talks about the 95% of businesses fail. They also did a more in-depth study on that. And it's actually not true. It's 95% of first businesses fail, but 80% of second businesses actually succeed. And the number one factor that actually determined the success of that was that the second time in business, the average time it took them to become quote unquote successful, which I think they put at like $250,000, was 2 years, instead of the first time businesses, which the average first time business lasts less than 6 months. It's the people who stick it out. It's not a game of if, it's a game of when with business. That's how I look at it.
I had never heard that stat. That's fascinating. That's really the other thing that was fascinating, brother. You just basically called AA a mastermind. And now that I've never been either, but it kind of is, right? It's a group of people, there's sponsors coming together like, hey man, I've had these challenges too. No offense to anybody that's gone through AA.
One of the best masterminds I ever went through, JM, was modeled off of a guy who built his whole thing as an AA meeting for entrepreneurs. It was glorious. I was like, this is beautiful. Because it's like, hey, come in and we have our little creed that we say at the beginning, and we talk through our failures. We ask for help. We talk about our wins. Like, it's awesome.
It's a great cadence. You nailed exactly how a meeting probably should go. Let's talk about the wins. Let's talk about expectations. What are the issues, and what's our ultimate outcome? We're going to stay sober. Great. See you next week.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. And the funny thing is, it's kind of like podcasting, right? Nobody will believe you until they do it. If you join a mastermind, you'll leave going, what just happened? My mind was blown like 40 times. And I've even been in a mastermind where I was like the most quote unquote successful in the room. And I was really like skeptical about coming to this one, because I'm like, they're all just going to want my advice. But I got so much actionable advice from that mastermind. It was uncanny. I was very, very pleased with it. So it really doesn't matter. If you get 3 to 5 brains in a room, just watch what happens. And if you can't afford one, build one. Reach out to 4 guys or ladies or whatever who are right in your realm of monetization and say, let's scale it up. Let's all scale together. I have 2 guys. We have a 3-person mastermind right now. None of us are paying each other, but we generate millions of dollars of business from those calls, because we're all like, hey, we're in the same industry. Let's move the industry forward, which is podcasting. And it's been great.
It's anytime you get together and you just talk things through, there's and multiple brains are in there. And it's not just you stuck in your way. Look, great things are going to come of it. Brother, I'm looking at the time and it's flying by. I want to give you just open forum, man. Anything I didn't ask you that you're like, JM, I have to share this with your audience. This is gold, whatever you want to share, brother. You have so much knowledge. You've succeeded, you've failed, all these great things. I want you the opportunity, just share whatever you want to share.
Yeah, I love having an open forum because this is something I love to share, and it's not a pitch on me. That's what's fun. I read a book, a biography. It was a Benjamin Franklin's biography. I read it probably 5-6 years ago, and he was telling the story about pirates, which I love like pirate games, pirate movies, anything pirates. I love it for some reason, which is they were horrible people, but such an interesting generation, right? But what was interesting is there was an infestation of pirates from, 2,000-3,000 before BC, right? And then clear down up until even I think it was the 1700s. Tons and tons of pirates. So the Royal Navy at the time, they were having such a hard time controlling the pirate problem because there were like 30,000-40,000 ships that were pirates, right? And the Royal Navy had 200 ships, and they were trying to manage all of those different ships and protect all these different settlements and different countries and things like that. And what was interesting is I think it was John Adams came in, and he said he came into the whatever, it's like the Royal Congress, whatever it is. I'm just going to sound so uneducated on that. But anyways, he shows up and he's like, what if instead of trying to have your Navy fix it, why don't we just pay privateers for every ship they sink? And so this pirate problem, right? 20, 30,000, 40,000 pirates, they've never been able to manage it because on average, it would cost them like 400 gold to get one ship to go out for 2 days with the Royal Navy. But they said, hey, for every time you sink a ship, we'll give you 100 gold or whatever it is, right? For a fourth of the cost, they were paying somebody else to go out and effectively accomplish that task. And within 2 years, all 40,000 pirates gone. They were down to under 200 pirates, right? What happened is they privatized it and they entrepreneurialized solving a huge problem. And so the way that I look at entrepreneurship is the bigger problem you solve, the more money you make. And if you look at your problems that you're having in your life, the things that you whine about, solve it. Be the person to solve it, right? Put a bounty out on the pirates, right? Get enough money flowing to solve the problem. Because I watch nonprofits all the time struggle with this. I have again, I'm going to try to keep this short, but I have an aunt and uncle. They have a school for girls in Kenya. It's called Daraja Academy. They've been doing it for 20 years. And I can't share exact numbers, but they barely bridged into 7 figures about 2 years ago in donations after 20 years of trying. And in order to keep this, and what they're doing is incredible. I love this nonprofit. We give to this nonprofit and everything. But if they were to privatize that, I don't know how they would do it, but if they were to privatize that, I guarantee you with the amount of work they put in, they could be at $100 million and solving the problem much, much quicker, right? And if you'll watch, the problems that are being solved in today's world are being privatized and are people actually stepping up and entrepreneurializing these things. So that would be my final thought for your audience, JM. And I hope everybody will take that to heart and say, how are we going to solve that next problem?
That's brilliant, brother. Before you go, man, where can people reach out to you, whether they want to start a podcast or looking for a good mastermind guy, just to see what's going on with Lucky Titan and everything you all have going? Where can they find you, brother?
So actually, we just launched a new site. So it's actually still being built as we're speaking, but it'll be done by the time this goes live. It's pantheon.fm. And that's actually where we're hosting all of these different podcasts that we have. This is the place that we push people so that we can put them in the right direction. So if you're like, Josh, I need help with lead gen, we'll send you in the right direction. Josh, I need help with the podcast, I'll send you in our direction because that's what we do, right? So on and so forth. So pantheon.fm, and then Pantheon is PANTHEON.FM. Go check that out.
Yeah, you guys, obviously he's done well, both in podcasts and businesses. He's a good dude. So, and he likes pirates. That was new on me, brother. So
yeah, pirates and Marvel, if you can't tell from my background.
Got that one, but well, brother, I appreciate you, man. You have helped me along the way. I have been on your show. You're an awesome dude. Keep up the amazing work because you're helping so many people with their dreams, their goals, their aspirations, and getting it out to the world. So I appreciate you.
Thanks, brother. Thanks for having me on. It was an awesome time.
Yeah, of course. Well, You guys, again, whether you're starting to look for a podcast, you just have some business questions, Josh is a great resource. Go check him out at pantheon.fm. I will be doing the same. And until next time, remember, your mindset matters. We'll talk to you then. Thank you so much for listening. If this content is delivering value to you, please make sure to subscribe, rate, and review us. That helps us build this community, and that is what we are all about. Building this community as big as we can, helping as many people as we can, and deliver as much value as possible. Be sure to head over to letsgowinpodcast.com for information on my coaching courses, and make sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Let's Go Win 365. Let's go win and transcend in life.
This is the Let's Go Win podcast with your host, J.M. Ryerson.